Today's story was written by Reddit user FarmWitch4275. The Grand Chamber rumbled with the idle chatter of the Galaxy's Federation delegates. The massive ovoid room, stories high, held individual hovering balconies, in which sat delegates and leaders from the Galactic Confederacy's many empires, monarchies, republics, dictatorships, hive minds, gesalts, corporate states, everything you could imagine, all from a different place, time and hope. 1,000 minds, 1,000 voices, but all willing to do anything to prevent a mass death or stand together for a great calamity. We realised this 2,000 years ago, and it has been since. A confederation of empires that has stood the test of time to such a ridiculous extent, it boggles the minds of scientists and scholars everywhere. I look at the room and quickly you suddenly realise why that is. Each balcony represented an empire and each sat 5 people, the leader, a vice leader, a diplomat, a translator and a human. The Terrans, as they were known, were the primary force behind all this. And over the last 2,000 years, it has become unusual to not see a human wandering around in some capacity. My Emperor himself has a human in his service as well. I stood quietly from my seat while my Emperor spoke with a delegate from the Eridani Imperium, catching up with an old friend as it were, and had a look around. Always, whenever I came here, I would look and see any new faces, names, clothes, anyone. I would memorise their faces and call them later to arrange a friendly meeting, or open the corridor to trade at a later date. My attention drifts over to an empty delegate seat. It had been over 200 years since it was last used, but kept immaculate. Karina, my Emperor's human concubine, appeared next to me in all her glorious splendour. "Master Ka, what is the matter?" I look at her and a sense of both pride and arousal hit me as I gazed upon this petite, beautiful creature. "Nothing, my dear, nothing. Just contemplating paradise again." "Oh, come on now, you only act like this when you are occupied with more important things." Her infectious smile captivated me, as it always did. "I was questioning that empty delegation seat down there. I have never seen it be used before, and was wondering what it was about." I pointed my long finger at the seat in question. She squinted her eyes and looked at it. It was a fair distance away. I handed her my magnifiers, which were in essence the alien equivalent to opera glasses, and let her look around. "Try these." It took longer than expected for her to find it, so my mind drifted, and looked around the room for longer. It was a sheer stroke of ludicrous 1 in several trillion luck we encountered humanity. And an even bigger 1 in a trillion stroke of luck, the kinds of things they would do. Not only were humans industrious to a staggering degree, their bodies and reproductive systems were compatible with almost all species in the galaxy, with little genetic intervention. With genetic intervention, they were capable of breeding with basically anyone. I looked around left and saw the cat-like Kitlar delegates with 2 human servants, both males, one of whom was the personal guardsman. Behind them were the lizard-like warrior race of the Juhai, again with 2 humans in their delegation, 1 male and 1 female, serving as military commanders. Similar scenes played out across the delegation, humans either as lovers, brothers-in-arms, soldiers, fathers, whatever role humanity could fill. It filled it with a sense of pride and loyalty the galaxy has not yet matched. Karina handed me my magnifiers and shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know, never noticed it before. There's always more interesting things to look at anyway." I smiled my best smile and allowed the Emperor's favourite concubine to return to her master's lap, and resumed my slow pursuit of the area. 10 or so minutes passed, Delegations were still moving into their respective seats, and the crowd's roar began to echo. It was at this point I noticed the Master of Ceremonies, the Lord Chamberlain Darius the Indomitable, had reached his perch atop the central platform, a creature the humans would call a dragon or wyvern, essentially sentient winged lizards, climbed atop his seat, a fake curly wig atop his horned head. He was in conversation with his fellows, 2 humans, 1 Eridani, and 3 Juhai Honor Guard, as the delegation finally finished assembly. Being part of the Tigranus species, the magnificent beast was the size of a small house. It was at this moment I finally noticed the Kawil, a jellyfish-like species, had their attention entirely subverted and directed to my lower left. I followed their gaze, and there they were, for the first time since taking responsibility as the Emperor's right hand. I finally knew what that delegation seat was for: the Sons of the Void. Calmly standing in perfect order, in absolute silent vigil with their hands in front of them in prayer, were 5 monks of a little-known religious group formed by the humans before the collapse of the Terran Empire. 2 of them held enormous swords, both of which looked polished to a mirror sheen. I recognised them as being plasma weapons, judging by the etchings on the blade. One carried a small device, like a spiked bull on a pole and chain with small puffs of smoke pouring from it. One stood in front, carrying a large book wrapped in chains at his side, and the last bore a large pole from which hung a banner. I instantly recognised the emblem. The emblem was a flag in black, gold and red, with a 7-pointed star at the centre of a large gear wheel. A black background, the gear wheel being of stitched gold, and the star being of a very menacing scarlet red. Each monk wore long flowing robes, underneath which they were elaborate, master-crafted, handmade metal polymer armour. Each and every piece of equipment they had was not only of legendary quality, but handcrafted from a material the galaxy wished they had access to. Each piece of armour and every inch of weapon had on its surface extremely elaborate patterns of gold, silver and red detailing. It was the first time I had ever seen them so close. I knew of them, well, certainly everyone does, but only once, maybe 600 years ago, did anyone ever encountered more than one engaged in a pilgrimage. Humans that abandoned Earth to worship an entity known as Shamora, the god of the void. Each man the equivalent of an army of thousands. Even the Tigranus, the house-sized acid-spitting masters of the galaxy, dared not cross them if they had an army of millions to bring to bear. It was now others had noticed my gaze, followed it, and stood in silence, mouths agape at the sight of the galaxy's most dangerous entity. Not just one, but 5 of them. The room quickly fell to awed silence as everyone's attention redirected itself straight to them. Even the Chamberlain was caught off guard at the sight of them, and stammered his words a bit. Finally, he stood to attention and banged his massive gavel to call the meeting to begin. "Ahem. I call this meeting to order," Chamberlain called out, snapping everyone out of their distracted awe. "Delegates of the Confederacy, we call to order 3 items for the meeting's itinerary. Her Majesty Queen Valine Farr of the Hegenian Imperium has the floor," he commanded, and one of the delegations moved away from the wall and began to speak of various hardships. I, however, was mesmerised by the sight of these warrior monks, standing in dead silence. I lost track of all time as I stared at them, questioning why, how, what, when and where. I lost track of time to such an extent I had missed out on the first 2 calls for assembly. Karina kindly filled me in on the events later. "Our final order of business." The Chamberlain looked at his roster. His face and wings, normally a deep grey, changed to a faded white as he read it out. "The delegates of the Sons of the Void, Grand Master Valtiel, Void Speaker." A sudden dread filled the room. Deafening silence followed by the soft hum of a repulsing engine. They moved quietly to prominence in the centre of the room. The one in front, holding the smoking bowl, spoke. his words barely an audible whisper, but to those hearing it, a thunderous roar. "We've found something." He held out a small holographic spheroid in his hand, and it flew up into the room near the roof, then activated. A short but blinding light, followed by what appeared to be a full holographic rendering of a massive star system. 7 stars, 2 of which had broken Dyson spheres, one had a Matryoshka brain around it, and one had turned a staggeringly strange green, with a series of rings around it. Each star had anywhere between 10 to a dozen planets in orbit. Above all this, every inch of space, every sphere point available had millions of starships, from fighter craft to planet-killing hyper-dreadnoughts in static positions. Perfect rows of millions of starships of every conceivable make, size, model, manufacture, style, and technology you could possibly imagine sat quiet arranged in perfect rows. An orchard of millions of derelict starships from hundreds of thousands of civilizations and species. We looked at the result in a state of abject shock. Silence drifted through the room for what seemed an eternity, until finally Valtiel spoke, his voice now menacing, loud, and filling half of us with fear, the other half with abject terror. "This star system we have named Elysium. We found it some 800 years ago, and settled in it, making it our official home." He pushed a button on a remote, and the hologram changed to one depicting one of the older planets, a continental world covered in many ancient structures. "We have spent the better part of the last 8 centuries sanctifying this site, arranging the starships and derelicts within it, and burying the dead. 47 billion graves, each with his own tombstone." He pushed another button, zooming in on another world, and we saw an orchard of gravestones in perfect order, like an orchard of tombs, stretching for hundreds of miles in every direction. Graves of every conceivable size, from small rodents to mounds of titanic beasts, littered the ground in perfect measured order, each one with a red and gold inscription. Various subspace anomalies and vortices of unknown qualification have spent the better part of the last few billion years collecting these ships, some a bit worse for wear, others in perfect condition. Each wreck has been painstakingly sterilized, repaired to the best of our ability, and left to remain. The oldest wreck is carbon dated to be 11 billion years old. He pushed another button, giving us a picture of a collection of 27 city-sized dreadnoughts, arranged in straight lines from smallest, around 6 kilometers, to the biggest, reaching a staggering 23 kilometers, each ship bristling with a truly staggering quantity of weaponry of all kinds. Then switched to another picture of cruisers, battleships, cargo ships and frigates, of every conceivable make and size, in perfect rows, in various states of disrepair from barely skeletons to pristine. "We have determined through exhaustive study this star system is not of coincidental or indeliberate manufacture." He pushed a button and gave us a picture of the extremely hyperactive green star in the centre of the system. The picture changes, and a massive set of 3 red balls of light appear on the star's surface. The picture changes again, and a very clearly distinct humanoid face with 3 eyes appears on the star's surface. "Behold, the Void God. His conduit, the green star." A gasp of shock and awe shattered the silence of the room. "Also, he would like to say hello to the Eridani. He is pleased by your accomplishments under his holy light. However, he would like it if you actually called him by his real name. Not Ericane, but rather Shama-Ra." His gaze suddenly appeared on us, and our faces went completely pale. Our home star system, capital of the Eridani Imperium, was that of a paradise planet orbiting an emerald star. A sudden terror and shock appeared in my heart as I processed this information. I stammered and shuddered, barely capable of giving any coherent response. I was interrupted by Valtiel, holding an armour-clad hand up to me. We understand that his guidance was somewhat lost in translation. His true name lost to history. All is forgiven, so long as his teachings remain. He is pleased. I could see the smile on his face. Even though he wore an iron mask obscuring his features, I knew for a fact Valtiel was smiling. The purpose of this meeting is simple. His greatness has invited you all, believers or non-believers, to enter his sacred graveyard. Valtiel stopped speaking, threw his head around suddenly and began to twitch like a demon possessed. His head rolled back, his mask fell off, revealing his eyes glowing a bright emerald green. He rose up from where he stood, levitated in the air, and hung in the centre of the room, arms outstretched. An otherworldly, inhuman, booming voice replaced his. My children, children of other gods, children of none, believers or non-believers alike, hear my words. Forever and a day I have sat watching from the shadows. Countless ages I have looked upon you, influencing, speaking, whispering, changing and guiding alongside others. By many names I am known: Ericane, Indicus, Lord Orakan, Indra, Jukani, Pel, Zelvahi, Tirani, Muldan. Many a time has my influence been abused or led astray by those without souls, but for the first time in the course of my existence, you, of all others, you have achieved the ultimate vision. A vision of peace, a vision of harmony. All empires that preceded you failed the first hurdle, and I struck them down without mercy as punishment for their insults. They engaged in open war, waging countless battles and destroying countless souls. And so I destroyed them to restore balance. You, my children, your great empire, despite their differences, has attained the impossible. As consequence, this deserves to be rewarded. My children of the void will bring a ship. You will go with them to my humble abode. All the technology, all the secrets of society, all you could possibly imagine lay waiting for you. I now leave you to recover the millennia of history, technology, and resources left by the shattered empires of failures past. All I ask in return is for you to never abuse this. Spread it far and wide, share my gift with the galaxy, grow, spread, prosper, find in all others you encounter a new spark of peace and prosperity. Now go. With that, Valtiel returned to his delegation and collapsed on the floor, his fellows helping him return to his feet, before ultimately making him sit in a chair. The encounter had taken a lot out of him. It can't be easy, being the voice of a god, can it? The hollow cube returned to its spot by the monks. Everyone waited with bated breath for Valtiel to regain his composure. When he finally did, he simply put his mask back on and stood in silence awaiting a response. A silence flowed through the room. Finally, I stood up from my seat, breaking the din, and yelled out, "The secrets of the universe on a silver platter? Fuck yeah, I'm in!" My crassness took all by surprise, and with that, 1,000 voices yelled aloud the same message in various tongues and dialects, as all delegates began to frantically call for their home fleets to begin assembly.